this week, the January 6th committee highlighted two key points from the investigation. Former President Trump knew he lost the 2020 election and lied anyways. And leading up to January 6th, and even on that day, Trump tried to bully Vice President Pence into overturning the election results. On Monday, the committee's vice chair, Liz Cheney, had this to say.
President Trump rejected the advice of his campaign experts on election night and instead followed the course recommended by an apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani to just claim he won and insist that the vote counting stop, to falsely claim everything was fraudulent.
During Thursday's hearing, witnesses told the committee how Trump and lawyer John Eastman demanded Pence stop the electoral vote count, and they explained why the demands were unconstitutional.
There is no justifiable basis to conclude that the vice president has that kind of authority.
Conservative Judge Michael Luttig also said that it's clear Trump and his supporters will likely seek to overturn the 2024 presidential election if the Republican nominee loses. He issued this stark warning.
Donald Trump and his allies and supporters are a clear and present danger to American democracy.
Joining me tonight to discuss this and more, Carol Leonnig, national investigative reporter for The Washington Post. Aisha Rasco, host of Weekend Edition Sunday on NPR, a big new gig. We're happy for her. And joining me here in studio, Scott MacFarlane, congressional correspondent for CBS News, and Eva McKen, national politics reporter for CNN. Thank you all for being here. Scott, I have to start with you. You've been all over these January 6th committee hearings and, of course, the prosecutions. I wonder, out of what all of the things that we saw this week, what sticks out most in your mind?
Yeah, 17 months later, we're still hearing revelations. We're still getting new details. It's quite striking. Two hearings this week, both went about 2 hours. It's how each hearing ended that I found most striking. Let's go back to Tuesday's, this hearing about voter fraud and the big lie and this election denialism. They ended the hearing focusing on how it was also a big grift, how out of this big lie, the Trump team, the campaign, set up these organizations that collected $250 million, money that is difficult to track, money that is somewhere in the ether. That was noteworthy, something we hadn't heard before. Then Thursday, we have this dynamic hearing about the pressure campaign put on Mike Pence before January 6th, the near-death experience he had on January 6th, and they finished the hearing with almost this predictive model from Judge Luttig that this wasn't a past threat. This is a kinetic threat, an ongoing risk to our democracy, almost prophetic that 24 hours later, Donald Trump's out there denying the insurrection, calling it a hoax, and denying that 5 people died.
And Scott, I should tell you, of course, this is your debut on Washington Week. And the way that you just broke that down, obviously, we're going to have you back at this table because you really do get at exactly how important both of these hearings were. You also said to our producers, specifically when it comes to Thursday and that timeline that lawmakers worked out, that it was particularly pivotal. Tell me about that.
Let's look at the timeline that they spelled out in the hearing. 2 p.m. The White House is warned. There's violence at the Capitol. The vice president's at risk. People could be hurt or killed. 2 o'clock. 2:24, Trump tweets criticism about Mike Pence, saying he lacked courage, again questioning the legitimacy of the election. 2:25 p.m., that's 1 minute later, Mike Pence is evacuated out the back of the Senate chamber. He comes within 40 feet of a riotous mob, some of whom, according to an FBI witness and the committee, were willing to murder him. 2:45 p.m., Ashley Babbitt is shot as they breach the House Speaker's lobby. That's the time frame. What the committee is saying is that Donald Trump directed a mob toward his vice president, and the committee has been unequivocal. They say Donald Trump was part of a conspiracy to defraud the United States, spelling out that time frame, illustrating it with the images and the rioters' voices. Was absolutely captivating and frightening.
It was riveting. And Carol, I want to come to you because the January 6th committee, they revealed new photos that were so striking. They show, we have for our audience, they show Vice President Pence underneath the Capitol, taking calls, refusing to get in a car, saying that he is going to continue to finish his duty. We have photos of those that we'll show in a minute. You counted the steps at the time of how close these rioters came to Vice President Pence. I wonder what you take away from the danger of what we now know, what the committee is arguing is a conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election.
Two great parts of the same question. So in the days after January 6th, my colleagues and I at the Washington Post were learning from Secret Service sources and others how close, what mortal danger Vice President Pence was in. And that timeline was known then too, that basically President Trump tweeted a target on Pence's back as people had broken into the Capitol. The first glass to break at the Capitol was at 2:10 p.m. And Trump tweeted for all of his supporters that he hated Pence and he lacked courage and, again, put that target on his back. What I take from the pictures, back to your question, Yamiche, is that Pence is staying calm and solid, per our reporting, and he's also acting like the commander-in-chief that day. He is determined, like no one can be determined, that he is going to stay and finish that job, despite the target on his back, despite President Trump sicking a violent mob upon him. And those folks who are tromping through the halls are chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." And he did potentially face the chance of assassination that day. So meanwhile, in a basement that is secure but not that secure, he refuses to get in the limo out of fear and concern that the Secret Service will whisk him away. He says to his detail leader, "Tim, I trust you, but you're not the guy driving the car. I'm not getting in." And he also begins a series of calls to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to the Secretary of Defense, and also to the acting Attorney General, calls that Donald Trump never made that day, to try to clear the Capitol, secure the building, check on the national security of the country and the Washington Capitol and the mall, and begins insisting, we're going to finish this work and I'm staying to do it.
And it's that decision really that allows the democracy of America to continue, lawmakers argue. Aisha, I want to come to you because we covered, of course, the Trump administration together. You said that all of the things that we're hearing, while of course striking, are also part and parcel with how an administration under Donald Trump was acting. Explain what you mean by that and talk a bit about what you took away from this week.
I mean, look, it's obviously clearly shocking to see how close the democracy of the U.S. came to falling. But at the end of the day, it's not that surprising when you have looked at what Trump was doing in the White House over and over again. You had basically over and over again, Trump would decide he wanted to do something. And then what would happen is you would have basically the White House will come up with some legal strategy to make it happen, even if it wasn't really legal, even if it was trying to get, the wall built and you don't have congressional funds, they would try to find some fig leaf. And so why are we surprised that when it came to the election and he wanted to stay in power, that he didn't want to keep that going, that he wanted to make sure that, look, I want to stay in power and I'm going to listen to the people who tell me I can do that. And that was John Eastman. And that's why John Eastman had all of this power. They kept pushing it and pushing it. And I think what comes out in these hearings is like how close we came to things going a really bad way. If things had just a few things had went differently, we would be having a very different discussion. And like, that's the thing that is so scary about January 6th.
And Eva, Aisha really does speak to exactly what I wanted to ask you about, which is the fact that there was all this praise for Vice President Pence, but there were also so many individuals who were trying to go the wrong way. What do you take away, especially because you're out there talking to people, talking to politicians who are still denying that the 2020 election was not rigged? What do you take away from how close we came?
Well, it was incredibly close. We were on the precipice of a constitutional crisis, and that can't be downplayed. My takeaway from this exercise, from these hearings, is that, America, I think, is having an opportunity to look at ourselves in the mirror. We often like to say that we are the beacon of democracy. From a young age, I think we are taught that we are the model nation and that other people should mirror how we act as a country. But look at who we were in our ugliest moment. I think that these hearings are so important because they are instructive about how we move forward. This idea that America is the greatest country in the world, well, we almost fell, as a matter of fact. And furthermore, I think that we put sort of a pin in the balloon of American arrogance. That was my takeaway. That we have to sort of be somber about this moment and really reflect on who we are as a nation. Also, this week, this should not get lost. The man that was carrying the Confederate flag through the Capitol, he was convicted along with his son. That really speaks to where we are as a country, and all of that should not get lost as we digest the meaning of these hearings.
And Kara, I want to come to you because talking about what doesn't want to get lost in this sort of humbling that we have these characters that show us at our ugliest. You talk about John Eastman. There's also, your newspaper broke, the Washington Post, that there are new emails that the committee has obtained between Ginny Thomas, who is the wife of Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Now the committee wants to talk to her. She tells conservative media that she's looking forward to talking to the committee. And when you look at all of this, my question is, what do you think lawmakers really hope to get when it comes to talking to Ginny Thomas, but also learning more about John Eastman?
You know, Yamiche, it's so smart for you to focus on that because this is a mess. I mean, I want to say get a broom. This is a mess. The committee is conflicted about, and has been conflicted about, questioning Ginny up until this moment, Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife. She's a GOP activist, has been for decades. However, in this instance, she appears to be somebody that was trying to aid and abet Donald Trump's push for a conspiratorial coup and was pushing the White House chief of staff to use every lever he could to keep Trump in power despite the election results. And now new emails suggest she was talking with Eastman, asking him to come speak to her group that she was associated with, a conservative group that also was seeking to keep Trump in power. What is worrisome about this for the committee? They're crossing into a line. They're getting some facts, hopefully, from Ginny Thomas, but now they're starting to investigate a person who's ultimately directly related to another branch of government. And what a mess it will be, because Clarence Thomas is in a situation where he can't rule on anything involving January 6th from here on out. His wife has been called to testify about her actions promoting what happened on January 6th, potentially. And I want to know the facts, but I'm concerned for where this ultimately leads. And I think that there are members of Congress that are wondering the same. How does Congress now, while investigating the executive branch, begin to investigate an arm of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, the judicial branch. Scott, you're shaking your head here. I want you to jump in because I'm really also interested in the fact that the DOJ is asking the committee for all their transcripts, and there's all this talk back and forth of whether or not there might be criminal referrals. What are you learning when you talk to lawmakers about, one, the tension between the DOJ and the committee, but also the criminal liability that some of these people like John Eastman could possibly be facing?
It's worth reminding folks, there's two separate unprecedented investigations. This January 6th committee is unlike any of us has ever seen. This unique group of 9, 7 Democrats, 2 Republicans, speaking with one voice, with choreographed and rather disciplined hearings. That's unique in Congress. But there's also the largest criminal investigation in American history going on. The Justice Department has charged 840-plus people. They've been pretty clear there are hundreds more to come. Many of those who've yet to be arrested are accused of assaulting police. These are high-level defendants. But there is a nexus between these two investigations. They're very interested in each other, obviously. They're both undertaking investigations of parallel things. But there's a group in which both sides are very interested. The Proud Boys, this seditious conspiracy case, this large group of alleged conspirators. It's the highest level Justice Department case so far. It's a case that they have made a huge priority. the name keeps coming up at the committee hearings, too. The committee has drawn some type of connection between the Proud Boys and the overall attack on January 6th. We'll see where they go. But the Justice Department, in the meantime, wants all the committee's depositions. They want the transcripts of the interviews, they say, so they can prosecute the Proud Boys and other January 6 criminals. There's a court hearing Wednesday in the Proud Boys case. Watch that closely to learn more about all those things.
It's fascinating sort of where they might be going with this. Aisha, I want to come to you because there was this moment where we heard of the big grift, apparently. They call it a big ripoff. It is, of course, the fundraising campaign that former President Trump undertook to try to collect money for the election fraud fund. And they say it's $250 million raised. What do you make of that, given the fact that, of course, this is something that is still ongoing when you listen to President Trump? Even today, he was at a rally saying that January 6th was a protest that kind of got a little out of hand.
Well, I mean, look, former President Trump would say that it was just a protest that got out of hand. He is not known for sticking to the facts. I mean, and we can say that, right? I think it's not like during this whole period of time. I was on the email list. I get the text messages as a reporter because I wanted to see, like, how are they trying to raise money? And, Trump never stopped raising money during this time. Like the PACs, they were going to save America and fix the election and all these things. And there's no accounting for where that money goes to, right? Like, and this has been, once again, this is a theme throughout the administration. This is a theme throughout Trump's history with public office when he was president, is that where does all the money go? He's trying to run his business, but he says he's not doing that, but his family's making money at this hotel. Like, there are all these questions of money and raising money and where it goes, and it continued to happen after the election. And the thing is, I think that a lot of the people that were sending this money, unfortunately, they're not going to be too concerned that it didn't go to helping the election or to fix the election or whatever they thought, because they back former President Trump, and they believe that, whatever he said, they would just send him money as a support thing. Like, that's so much of this has become with Trump. It's not about like what actually happens. It's just about showing their support for him. It's really like an identity issue.
And Kara, I want to come to you before we quickly turn to the economy, which of course is a big deal. But one last question for you on January 6th, which is, there was this shrinking inner circle where you see people leaving the picture, where it's Bill Sepien or it's Ivanka and Jared. You have talked to and interviewed former President Trump after leaving office. Who is with him now, and what does the future of this movement look like?
Oh, wow. Good question. So when Phil Rucker, my co-author, and I at the Washington Post, we went down to see him in Mar-a-Lago in March, and it was like he was living in, I don't know, Napoleon's Elba or his own little Brigadoon. He was living an alternative reality where he won the election, John McCain was evil, everybody was stupid who was in the Republican Party who didn't support him, and he was still being celebrated with Hail to the Chief on the Mar-a-Lago patio when he went out to dinner after we interviewed him. People stood at attention. This is where he was living in his mind. As for the people that are still around him, it's a much smaller group of Secret Service agents, smaller detail, and just a few loyal folks who have stayed on. I did not see either Ivanka or Jared. However, at dinner, I did see Donald Trump Jr. and Kimberly Guilfoyle and Eric Trump and his wife, Laura. So there is still a hardcore group. There were also people who were coming to sort of kiss the ring. Lawmakers who want to get reelected in the midterms, and they're seeking his endorsement. That is not any joke. I will say, however, it seems that his support, his ardent support from people like a Bill Barr or like the cadre of old mainstream Republicans has all but disappeared, all but dried up. Those folks are quietly saying the man's off his rocker, and we're not going to double down with him ever again.
Well, it's fascinating that you're giving us that reporting, and I really appreciate you sort of giving us that window into where this movement is.